Hello, everyone. Yeah, this is like the second time in a week that I've hopped on Twitch, and I'm bringing with me friends along the way. Right now, I have waiting in the wings my friend Michael Brown, who is a Dune expert. That's what I'm going to call him. He's a Dune expert, and I have not read the book yet, but I saw the trailer a few weeks ago, and it blew my mind. And of course, I know that along with Lord of the Rings, this is one of those must reads if you even want to claim that you are a fan of speculative fiction. So, yes, I know I have to read it. I'm going to see the movie. And so, Michael and I, in just a minute, are going to talk about the movie. We're going to talk about the book. He doesn't really need to persuade me to read it, but we'll talk about his experience having read it and his thoughts. And we'll even go through the trailer and discuss it, kind of what stood out to us, what interests us. I have my chat bar open, and so if you guys have any questions or any thoughts or any comments, feel free to jump in. As I see them, I'll try to respond. Otherwise, just expect some technical difficulties. Last time I did this interview format, I had some serious lag on the video, but the audio, if it's still working good, just don't look at us and think of it as a podcast. So anyway, I'm working through all the video stuff. Each one of these, I get a little bit smarter and a little bit better at it. But yes, we are going to talk about Dune, the epic novel and novel series by Frank Herbert. And without further ado, let me bring on Michael. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Although I think I need to take issue with being a Dune expert, but let's just say a Dune fan.
Okay.
But at least I do have the recent experience of rereading the novel recently.
Well, let
So
me
just finished it up a little about a couple months ago. I finished up a rereading of it.
Oh, that's a good place to start because obviously, when you're talking about something as big as Dune, there's always going to be people who are like super fans who can like talk about the family lineage and they read the book series once every year. So I understand like you don't want to like come to something like Dune professing to be an expert when there's probably those people out there that that's like all they live and breathe and talk about. But when did you first discover the book?
I was in the eighth grade when I first learned about it, and being in that having friends that were we were in that nerd culture. This is back in 1982, I'm guessing, and is about right. And having gotten involved with gaming, playing D&D, you get into that nerd clique, and friends of mine had somehow stumbled across this book in this small town that I grew up in. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a try. And I spent the better part of a year reading the first few chapters over and over, not in the sense that, not in the sense that it actually took me that long to read it. I would read it, and it was very difficult to get into
Yeah.
for my eighth grade brain. And then I picked it up. I think it was the summer following my eighth grade year, and that's when all of a sudden I started with the first chapter again, and I couldn't put it down all summer. It was just it just sucked me in, and I'm not sure why all of a sudden everything clicked. But I had a few false starts before I actually started to get into it.
That's interesting because I kind of had the same experience with Lord of the Rings, with
Hmm.
because for whatever reason, like I knew it was a foundational work that if I was gonna love
Right.
Dragonlance and really get into all that stuff, it was like, well, and D&D, obviously you and I are both playing the same D&D campaign, but like it's one of those things where like you're like, okay, I can't have died and be like, I never read Lord of the Rings. So did you
Right.
approach Dune like with your eighth grade brain realizing like I don't want to say it's like sacred text, but you're like, this is an important book. Did you feel like that?
Uh, the I, in a way, yes. And I think what really cemented that was the fact that I had so many false starts in trying to undertake the reading. Uh, and it wasn't because I had an eighth grade brain where I, would lose focus or anything like that. It just, I, for whatever reason, it just wasn't sticking with me. And but when it finally did, uh, the you know, there were things that just really, really were cemented in my brain, like the litany against fear, which you hear in the bits and pieces of in the trailer. And you know, there probably isn't a Dune fan around who doesn't have that memorized.
Hmm.
Some people would say, "Oh, it's like you have that memorized. You must be an expert." It's like, no, I think if you're a fan, you just know it, and it really you know at, once I finally got into it, it really started. I realized I was reading something very profound, and it was something on par with Lord of the Rings. Although there were a lot of things, just like in Lord of the Rings, there were a lot of themes that I missed that I did not pick up until later readings when I had gotten older and was able to understand some of the themes that were actually being presented more.
Yeah, and as someone who is a writer, I do know that sometimes when you can't get into a book, sometimes it is the writer's fault. Like I think as readers, we sometimes think, well, if I'm not getting into it, then clearly it's me. It's not the writer. I have heard and agree or disagree. I've heard that Frank Herbert as a technician of the craft, his writing is not as great as some fantasy writers, but his story and world building like more than makes up for it. Do you feel that's true, or do you feel as a writer he still is right up there?
No, I completely agree with
I,
you. He he it's to kind of bring it back to D&D. He actually kind of reminds me of Gygax.
yeah,
This is somebody who can come up with these ideas and can formulate a lot of theories, and this is what we should do, et cetera. But putting it on paper, it doesn't. Well, it makes sense, but it's definitely not the most well crafted writing. Now that said, I mean Frank Herbert naturally, I mean he is a fantastic writer, unlike Gary Gygax, but but his design and things like that, the world building that you mentioned, that was that is really, I think, the greatest bit, and more than makes up for the flaws and that you would think of in some of his author talents, if you will. He's it's the story that draws me in, as opposed to any particular style of writing. There are some authors that they could write a cookbook and you would read it,
mm,
and others, the theme depends upon it, or the genre, that sort of thing. But I would agree with your statement there.
yeah. Like I mean, it's kind of funny. The whole theme of tonight is probably fantasy writers that went right under our nose, and then we find them, and we're like, ah, where have you been my whole life? I've been on this just ridiculous Ursula K. Le Guin kick, and
Hmm.
my whole family's probably sick of hearing me talk about her. But I started reading her stuff. I was reading A Wizard of Earthsea with my daughter Greta, and it blew my mind just from a technical standpoint how good of a writer she was. And I was like, this is the writer I've been waiting for. Like this is the
Right.
person that I was like, I've been looking my whole life for a hero, and along she comes, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know shit. Like this person is so good. But at the same time, I think like people like Frank Herbert, you get sucked into their world, and you're like, oh, there's this whole world going on here that like yeah, and I kind of wanted to segue with, I have to imagine that you saw Star Wars before you read Dune.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah.
Was there a moment while reading Dune where you went, wait a second here?
uh, there was, I don't think I really saw. I don't think I really drew any comparisons.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that when I was reading Dune, uh, there was probably a lot of the imagery in my head was being influenced by the visions of, by this time, Empire Strikes Back. So the Sardaukar, for example, may have had a certain stormtrooper element to them, to a certain extent. But I really didn't. I didn't really feel. It felt very different to me, and ironically, bringing that up, this was a science fiction story, but I actually worked to bring uh, some of the uh, some of the names and some of the genre, if you will, or not genre, but some of the Dune elements. I tried to bring into an existing D&D campaign that I was playing.
Hmm.
So I think my link there was less science fiction and more of this fantasy fiction, with a science element, and that's so I really didn't think much about it. But of course, you know, I I wonder how much Lucas would have been influenced by it, but it didn't feel. Unfortunately, I haven't read the Joseph Campbell. I forget what the novel is, but the
The
main one that inspired George Lucas.
Hero with a
Uh,
Thousand Faces.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I really would love to get into that now because when you look at Paul Atreides, Muad'Dib, it's of course that's probably going to resonate. And I would probably draw a few more links now, but Dune exists now in its own little world. It did early on for me, and then now it does as well. And I also think an issue there was this when I was really into Dune, because I read it several times in high school. By that time, Return of the Jedi had come out, and so my Star Wars fandom had begun to ease thanks to the Ewoks, and so it started to become less influential on on things that or less inspiring to me, if you will.
Well, and I think, I was thinking about Ursula K. Le Guin. It's hard to talk about Earthsea without talking about Harry Potter, because
Okay.
there's a lot of parallels between those, and
Mhm.
it's hard to imagine that J.K. Rowling did not get massive amounts of inspiration from it. But at the same time, like, Harry Potter will always be commercial. It's always commercialized. It's going to be, stuffed plush pillows of Harry and Hermione and action figures and toys and cereal and all this stuff. And then you've got like Earthsea, which is, I just don't know if it's ever going to be commercial. I imagine the same as with Dune. Whereas Star Wars is over merchandised, I can't imagine that Dune will ever become that sort of a sensation.
Uh, you know, I don't think I don't think so because I think the themes are a little too serious,
Yeah,
and there's no there's no levity in Dune.
yeah.
It's just not a it's not a happy place. There are no there no one's going to get inspiration from a kiss as they vault across a chasm while trying to avoid stormtroopers. There are just no moments like that, and so as a result, especially given this upcoming adaptation, I can't imagine it being any different in that respect. So I think you're right there. It's not going to have that type of commercialization and popularity in that sense
Yeah,
that you would see with Star Wars or Harry Potter.
yeah. Now, dare I ask you about the David Lynch version of Dune?
I
I haven't seen it,
You
by the
can.
way.
It's um, well, I am not a huge David Lynch fan, so I don't necessarily get him very much. So I when I watched it, when it came out, I was which was about the time that I'm not sure what year it came out. I think maybe it was '84 because I had read the books prior. because I was extremely excited about the movie.
Yeah.
I wasn't very impressed when it came out, and I did recently rewatch it, and it was a suffer fest. I really there were elements that I really liked, but overall, I can't bear to I can't bear to have anything to do with it.
Now, if I understand correctly, though, the new movie is going to be a two-parter. So we're watching really part one this year, and I think next year we get the second part of it, is what I understand. So it's going to
That's
be a lot. It'll be longer than the David Lynch
right.
one. And was that part of the
Yes.
problem with the David Lynch version? Was it was just like you're taking a book that is, I mean, it's roughly what, an 800-page novel, and you just turned it into a 2-hour film or however long it is.
Right, right. There is a lot to go through,
Yeah,
and I given the time frame, I think that they did a good job. Uh, or given the fact that it's like, okay, we gotta have this clock in at 2 hours.
yeah.
Considering all that, I got to give them props. But but yeah, that was a major difficulty that they had to deal with. And there were also a few things that they added that were unnecessary, that were not from the book.
Yeah.
And I still question. It's like, why exactly did they add this? I have no idea. Uh, and to even further illustrate, how much I have to, not being a fan, it had my favorite rock and roll star Sting in it, for crying out loud, and I still could not stomach it. I mean, I just could not bear it at all. But I have forgiven Kyle MacLachlan, because now that he's in Portlandia, et cetera, it's like, all right, we can deal with it that way.
Yeah, it's a different look for him as the mayor of Portland.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's more fitting. I think he makes a better Mayor Ted than he does a Paul Muad'Dib.
Nice. Well, here, I'm going to try. Let's see if I can actually make this work. I'm going to try to bring up the trailer on screen share. So let's see if I can do that
Okay.
first. All right. So you're able to see
All
it?
right. Yep, I absolutely am.
All right. Now I'm going to close this down, put that over here. And now we're going to bring it up on our Twitch stream. And what I'm going to do is if this is your first time watching the trailer, which I know not for you, but for anyone watching this video, if this is your first time watching this, I would seriously suggest watching it all the way through because I'm going to like stop it like every few seconds to get your take on things. So it's not going to be the great first viewing. Let's start it up.
There's something happening to me.
All right, so I'm going to stop right there. I told you I'm going to stop it a lot. So how
Sure.
excited are you with the opening music and that first shot of Paul?
The the fact that you've got it's I don't even really recognize the music at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's and so having watched it again and knowing what the music is, I think colors my response to it now. But seeing Timothy Chalamet, I believe is how his name is pronounced.
No one
You know,
knows.
as yeah, I think he does, and I think that's it.
Yeah.
It's I mean, immediately locked in. It's like that is Paul right there. It's and I was excited about it, but when they announced the casting, I had seen him in a few things, and but yeah, that scene gave me goosebumps, uh, to say the least. That's to put it mildly, because I think he's just the perfect person for it.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
There's something awakening in my mind. I can't control it.
What did you see?
I'm having a little bit of
Yeah.
mine is skipping a little bit.
Okay, sorry about that. That's probably just the video. As I said, we're gonna have technical difficulties. Eventually, I
Yeah.
need to like figure out how to get the video part working out. But we do get the kiss between Paul and the woman there. And this is just more my own curiosity. They put that right at the beginning of the trailer. how much does a love story factor into the book itself?
It it I don't know how. I don't feel like that it is. It's present,
Okay.
but it is not enough to keep. It's not enough to weigh in for the. I hate to say it this way, but the stereotypical. The way that they would try and present a story to cross over to male and female audience members, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's the story there is present, but not. I mean, by doing that in the trailer, I think that is a very specific, effort to try and reach out and have that element be a little bit stronger in the movie than it was in the book. That said, there are elements of it in the book that is or that are significant because the relationship between Duke Leto and also his basically his lady, who is nothing more than a concubine, is very significant and features prominently. But it's not one of those things to where it's much of a love story. But it's but it does feature in, especially because I'm thinking of the ending of the book, which of course I won't say anything, but it's present. I think that's just the best way to describe it.
Okay. Well, and I know that, and this may be kind of a bigger conversation here that we can have after we watch the trailer, but when we talk about, let's see, I'm frozen right there. When we talk about Dune, I know that I've heard criticisms that it is kind of, I know it came first, but Dances with Wolves, Avatar, it's very much sort of the white settler who sort of gets amidst the you might call the original peoples of a particular group
Right,
and kind of lives among
right.
them and learns their ways, and it's I've heard some people call it quote unquote a white savior story. But there's a wonderful conversation we can have about that because I do have my thoughts on that trope, but
Okay.
arguably Dune did it before the other ones did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's there's certainly some colonialism going on. I
Yes.
think is the term that you hear a lot about nowadays, and it's. I mean, it's pretty obvious that that the author was. I mean, um, he was writing in the time he was in,
Yeah.
and those themes were much more. I mean, they're still around, but I mean, they were definitely that was the norm back then.
Yeah.
So it's I hesitate to. I mean, it makes it just one of the regular pack in that regard.
Yeah.
Um, so there was he wasn't very enlightened in that regard, but then again, I don't think many were.
True.
I think his enlightenment came in maybe more on some of the ecological themes
Mm.
that figure prominently in the book that you don't that obviously the trailer doesn't hint at. And I'm not sure how much they'll cover it in the movie, but he did have that going for him.
Very nice. Let's keep going.
There's
Oh, wait,
a
hold on.
crusade coming.
Do you often dream things that happen just as you dreamed them?
Yes.
All right. Pause. I can't get his last name, but the director there. Um,
Yeah,
this personally,
let's not butcher that. The director of Blade Runner 2049.
I don't want to get too effusive, but this has to be like, this has to make fans feel good. Like, this guy is an incredible director.
Oh yeah, yeah. It when I've kind of got it pulled up here, and so I was kind of keeping it posed on, or keeping elements of it on my phone so I could see more of it scroll. Uh, when I mean, I had no idea that he was even involved when I went and saw Blade Runner 2049,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden we have this going on. I see that and I find out he is actually going to be doing Dune, and yeah, to say that I was excited is an understatement. Uh, it's because I thought this is somebody who can actually, pull this off. Uh, I mean, I really do. I think he's got the vision for it. Just the way that he carried, Blade Runner 2049 into, I mean, he took somebody else's, previous work,
Yeah.
and just the way that it is shown on screen is absolutely incredible. So his vision, what he likes to put on screen, I think is, I mean, this is the perfect type of movie for him to actually, undertake as based on what I've seen from that,
Yeah,
from 2049.
and I don't want to read too much into this, but I would also hope that since it's not a white director, maybe he will be a little bit more sensitive to some of the colonialism themes and may be
There's
able to address them in ways that I think are probably more sensitive to audiences.
I It wouldn't surprise me, to be honest, because we see some changes in. Hang on, I'm trying to pause this. There we go. Uh, we we've seen a couple of changes that some people have criticized, and because it strays away from the novel.
Hmm.
But I think that it's done in a way to try and bring a you know I I hate to use the phrase bring diversity,
Hmm.
but that that's really the best way that I can actually say it, or just put it across, uh, because it's it's like the problem that Star Wars had. They didn't have there was no diversity in Star Wars.
Yeah.
What they called diversity were the aliens, and that really didn't count. And they did try to address this, but when you look at our world for real, it is incredibly diverse. And I think that, anytime you're doing an adaptation of something, you do have to make it something that people understand, and can relate to, uh, because that's the world that actually surrounds them. So as a result, I know that there are some changes that he's made. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see him make some, to see him try and present it in a way where you do have a less, where it's less white saviorish, if you will.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's keep going.
Yeah, sure.
The test is simple.
Oh, I just went like 2 seconds and then stopped again. Okay, the pain box.
Yeah.
I know the pain box is a big thing. Once again, have never read the novel, but I know that this is a big thing in the books, and that's something that every fan is looking for. Is like, okay, there's the box. Can you tell me a little bit about the
Everybody,
pain box?
yeah, it is the test given to determine uh, if someone is human, or their definition of human.
Hmm.
Uh, without getting into it, in with too deep, there is this group of they're really female mystics, a religious group called the Bene Gesserit, and they are trying to they're trying to, uh, let's say, evolve the species,
Mhm.
and through genetics. And one of the things that they do is they like to test people who are worthy for training and such to make sure that they are human. The test being an animal caught in a trap will chew off its leg to escape the pain and the trap. And the test to see if you're human is to keep your hand in the box. It's one of the quotes from the book is pain by nerve induction. She coolly says after the fact. But yeah, that box is quite the thing.
Well, and it sounds like it's the good grounds for like when people start like their post-book discussions, it becomes the okay, like you project yourself. What would I do if I was
Yes.
in this situation?
Yeah.
Would I pass the test?
You if you pass, you live. Um, so it's a nice test. I don't know if I would
Remove your
live.
hand from the
It would be a tough one.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
box, and you die.
What's in the box?
Pain. You inherit too much power.
All right, I'm going to pause right there because I am stopping quite a bit.
Okay.
But the dude looks good in the black. It's just
Yeah.
a cool look. I'm like,
It
yeah. Oh, sorry,
it
you go.
really is. I think I expected to see. To be honest, I think I expected to see a little bit more color.
Yeah.
As far as the costuming in that part of not necessarily well, certainly in the trailer, but in that part of the movie, because of where that actually takes place. It is definitely nothing like the planet known as Dune. That said, yeah, I mean he looks really cool, and that's definitely a great outfit.
And I think
Uh,
we're going to get a couple of shots right here that really sort of showcase this idea that the movie is going to focus a lot on world building. It just seems like they really are flexing their muscles here to show us what they've done.
yeah,
You have proven you can rule yourself. Now you must learn to rule others. Something none of your ancestors learned.
My father rules an entire planet.
He's losing it.
He's getting a richer one.
He'll lose that one too.
All right, so obviously they're kind of setting up the basis of what brings them here. My
hmm
understanding is that now the planet that they're leaving, is that basically a used up Earth, or where are they going from? Where are they going to?
Actually, that is a planet known as Caladan, and that is, for lack of a better term, the fiefdom of House Atreides, and they have um, they have been given Dune by the Emperor to go and instead of Caladan. So in this world building, your kingdom is actually an entire planet,
Hmm.
and Caladan is where the Atreides family is from. So that it there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that they're actually offered the planet Arrakis, which is rich in spice. And so financially, it makes sense for them to go ahead and make the move and leave that home world behind, although they know that it's extremely dangerous.
And consequently, this is, I'm sure, where some of the colonialism comes in because they're basically going to occupy a planet that I'm assuming already has people on it.
Yes, but they are an occupying force that that is replacing a previous occupying force. But that said, the colonialism still holds. Much the way as we have seen in our own history, over the past century, for example, and sometimes even in the past, 50 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there is a native population that settled there, thousands and thousands of years ago, and has adapted to life on the planet, and they are there to try and make use of them to a certain extent, but still the people are there. They're not in the way, but they can be in the way.
Hmm.
Uh, it's uh, uh, it's one of those things that uh, I'm trying to think of more of a real world. It's not like the Native Americans here in the United States, which we're in the way and we needed to get rid of them. So much as this is, they do their thing, we do ours. Sometimes they have a conflict, so it's a little bit different, but they're still an occupying force.
It sounds a little bit like, and once again, the history majors can correct me. Sam Houston, the first president of the Republic of Texas, was very much a coexistence advocate.
Ah,
He really
okay.
believed that Texas should be sort of a model for friendship between the indigenous people of the state and then also the people that were coming in to settle it. Um, Obviously, that did not go well, but
Right.
I do know that Sam Houston was definitely a sort of we can live and work together kind of person. Let's
Yeah.
continue on because I'm going to stop it the moment we see Jason
Sure.
Momoa.
Okay.
And there he is. Okay. So is it just me or can Jason Momoa only play Jason Momoa?
It's I think that is just who he is, and that's really who we want him to be. I
Exactly.
mean,
I don't mind. Jason Momoa, they could just call him Jason Momoa during the movie and I wouldn't care.
yeah. I mean, Jason Momoa. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, he is. I know he's on my wife's list. You know, he's on my list for crying out loud. I
That's one
mean,
good
the
looking man
dude,
right there.
the he's an incredible force on screen,
Yeah.
and I really but yeah, he has a certain niche to fill, and he fills it quite well
Now,
in these roles.
now I am picking on him a little bit because when he was playing Khal Drago, oh gosh, was that the name?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely played a much more stern, serious, like he played that role very much like a stoic warrior king. But
Yeah.
now that we know the real Jason Momoa, it just seems like his personality just bleeds all over the screen. And I don't mind. Now, this character in the book, is this the sword master? Is this who is
This is Duncan, Idaho, is his name, and yeah, I have no idea where that came from. I've never checked that out. I really need to Google that as where the inspiration for Duncan, Idaho came. But yes, he is. He basically is, the Duke's right hand man. I mean, he is of great importance to the Atreides house, and even more so than Gurney Halleck, who is portrayed by um, Josh Brolin.
yes.
But yeah, and Duncan, Idaho, he is he. There's no doubt in my mind that when they were looking at who they wanted to bring on to play that, they had to get Jason Momoa because the dude is just he's an utter badass. That said, he is nothing like I pictured him in the novels.
Hmm.
When as you're reading and these characters begin to take on a life of their own inside your head, I never would have put that in. But it works for this because I really feel like that, especially with my most recent rereading, and already knowing who was playing who, I feel like that it fits really, really well.
I would say that that is one of the hard things about any time a beloved novel gets translated to a movie is it's going to forever affect future readers and how they see those characters in their mind. Um,
Yeah.
because reading Lord of the Rings, I mean, I'm always going to see Legolas, Gimli, like I see the actors in the movie every time I read it. I don't have my own
Right.
picture of them. And I would argue, and we've talked about it a lot while playing D&D, I would actually say that that is it kind of ruins the immersion when all of a sudden I'm seeing the the actors and same with Game of Thrones. Like when I'm
Hmm.
working my way through Clash of Kings right now, like when I see Jon Snow, I see the actor, and so it is
Right.
like it or not, when the movie or the TV show takes on this big, preeminent role, then you're like, okay, I'm just going to see that character now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's why I think it's helpful to, for some of these books, it's like, read them first. I mean, I would
Yeah,
encourage anybody who it wants to, who's going to see the movie or is excited about it. It's like definitely, read the book.
hmm,
But still, even seeing the trailer, it's gonna definitely color their imagination. That said, I mean, with a lot of this imagery, they're getting a lot of things right,
that's
in my
great.
opinion.
Very good.
I really think that they have that.
All right, let's keep going.
Arrakis is a death trap.
Kill them. This is an extermination. They're picking my family off one by one.
Let's fight like demons.
An animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. What will you do?
I know you.
All right, I'm going to pause right there. This is my favorite part of the trailer. This is the
Okay.
part where I start getting chills. And I don't know about you, but I have become a huge fan of music in trailers that doesn't feel like it should go, but absolutely fits. And what I mean by that is it's Pink Floyd being used in the Dune trailer, which I know that I guess it was the illustrator for Dune or something was like really big into psychedelia and like I think there is some combination between Dune and the psychedelic influence and the use of Pink Floyd, but like something about using sort of these songs that you like. I will give you the example that I often think about is with Mad Max Fury Road. There's like freaking opera music during the trailer.
Right.
And I remember seeing that and going, "Oh hell yeah!" Like I don't know why, but the use of opera music during this crazy action scene, I'm like, "This is I'm now all into this." And I've seen a few movie trailers do that more recently. I think um, the movie Enola Holmes, which is on Netflix right now, they use Hole's
Yeah.
doll parts in the
Yes.
trailer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm like,
I just saw that trailer.
isn't it great? Like once you hear that darn it, darn it, darn it, you're like,
I
oh, okay, yeah,
know. Right.
I'm suddenly even more interested in the movie than I was before. So I don't know. For me, that's like whenever the bridge to that song kicks in, like just chills all over. And of course, obviously the action is building up during that scene. But
Sure.
oh,
Sure.
just that was the
Yeah.
part where I was like,
I
oh hell yeah.
Yeah, I really thought that was a nice touch. There was a filmmaker, and I'm drawing a blank. It's like Jurdowski or something like that. And that's what makes me not an expert, because an expert would actually know. There was a filmmaker who attempted to who was going to make Dune as a movie, and this is like in either late '60s or early '70s, uh, and and when you look at the artwork that they had prepared. That's where you see that psychedelic influence, and I can't help but think
Mm,
that the choice of the song is somehow tied to some of that influence. There are some similarities between just a couple things here and there with some of the costuming
mhm,
that I've seen that throw back to this unfinished project that was attempted back in in psychedelic times, as I can call it. So I think that's probably where the influence that, or I think that's where that choice of song may have come from, at least to a certain extent.
yeah. Well, and I'm also a big fan. Like I read fantasy and science fiction because I want shit to get weird.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I want there to be like, "Oh, okay, this is kind of bending my mind right now, and I'm seeing the world in a new way, and it's stretching me and pulling me." And yeah, now obviously this little sequence here, it really kind of amps up the action of it.
Yeah.
Did you feel that Dune was an exciting book when you were reading it, or because I sometimes feel that some of the older sci-fi and fantasy um, could move a little slow, and I didn't know if you felt like the book actually was if you feel like the
I,
action is reflected in it.
uh, they, I don't really feel, I don't call it an exciting book.
Yeah.
It's enthralling, but it's definitely, I don't feel like that that is as I don't think it's on display in the text.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, there are these great, there are scenes, of battle, et cetera, but it's almost, I mean, it's not glossed over by any means, but it definitely isn't something where you are hanging on the page that you are with other novels. But there are a couple of scenes that I think uh, do well, but only because they are also telling a story at the same time. Again, I don't want to, I don't want to say anything that spoils it, but there is a confrontation near the finale that is very exciting. But again, it's something that has to do with the story itself, and the action is almost insignificant in proportion to that. But I would call those, there are a couple of sections like that are a little exciting, but overall it can be, I hesitate to use the word slow, but in
Mhm.
some respects it can come off that way.
Yeah, and I feel like this may just be the genre itself growing and developing because now you actually do have writers who that's like their bread and butter, like they specialize in the fight. And I'm thinking like
Oh yeah.
R.A. Salvatore would be a great example of a guy who
Yes.
just, I mean, the guy can write a good fight scene.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. So it's yeah, it's people who have been able to go and read books like these, and of course all so many others, but who have been inspired to become writers as a result of this.
Mhm.
You're increasing the talent pool,
Yeah.
and when that happens, the pool gets deeper. And I like to think of when you have that outreach there, people who are inspired by this to become authors, you get these viewpoints that you didn't always have. And people can hone their craft, especially nowadays. Well, I say nowadays, but
Yeah.
I really feel like at this point in our civilization, you really can get a lot of people who can really hone their craft with words in a way that maybe we didn't get to, maybe that we, that certainly wouldn't have been seen, hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conversation probably for another video that we'll have to come back and talk about. But I do think about like, what if J.R.R. Tolkien was not working? I don't know if he hand wrote or if he was on a typewriter, but like, what would have been different if he had Microsoft Word?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
I'm on, in so many ways, I'm so glad that he didn't.
Yeah.
If only because I treasure those works so much, and the fact that he has, notes scribbled there's just these troves of notes and writings, et cetera, that form this. It's a treasure trove
Yeah.
that it makes me wonder, and that would be something worth talking. Maybe you can get Ari Salvatore on this to discuss it. What kind of notes are left, from the finished, compared to the finished product, in a world where you can completely rewrite something and not even have evidence of what you were writing over.
That is a great point because, I just finished my first novella of the Dryad's Crown, and I put my notes on the Word document. And as I wrote the stuff that satisfied those notes, I deleted them because it was a space saver. It was
Right.
like, put this here, and then I put it in there, and then I don't need the note anymore. And now I have notes for book two that, once I write that scene, it's like, well, I don't need to have this anymore because I did it. But, you know, but yeah, you do lose sort of the artifact of, oh, this was what the person was thinking about when they were doing this. And yeah, so yeah, that in itself is kind of an interesting, yeah, with
Yeah.
technology, how that
And
changed.
and somebody like R.A. Salvatore would also be interesting because when he started writing, and especially even when he really hit it big, with like the Crystal Shard series,
Hmm.
this, they weren't using, he wasn't using the technology that he has available today.
True.
So yeah, that's very interesting.
Now, the other thing I just realized, and I've seen this trailer way too many times, it just now occurred to me that Paul is wearing black. And who is the love interest again? You got to give me the.
Cheney,
Cheney's
portrayed
wearing,
by Zendaya,
yes,
I guess is how you say her name.
she's wearing white. So we have the
Well,
chess
I
pieces.
I think uh, I think that's from a vision. However,
Okay.
how in the reference, um, the Reverend Mother asks, about his dreams and if they come true, the things that he sees, and I'm sure that she is simply that the portrayal of her in white is probably a vision.
All right. Well, let's keep going.
One day, the legend will be born. All of civilization depends on it.
The future. I can see it. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer.
All right, let's stop right there for just a second. First of all, I got to ask the question, blue eyes factor into the story, am I correct?
That is correct.
Because
Yes.
I keep seeing it in the book covers, versions of the character with like these piercing blue eyes. And of course, I think about the David Lynch version with the blue eyes. And then obviously we
Yep.
see her with the blue eyes. So is it spoilery to ask about the blue eyes, or am I gonna have to wait?
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, probably helps a lot to kind of have some background. I wonder what kind of exposition they will have for this movie. Similar to Lord of the Rings, for with Lady Galadriel speaking at length for about about the setup for the story of the Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know if you were aware of this, but when the movie was released, they actually gave you a two-page handout, front and back handout, to
That's awesome.
explain some of the terms, et cetera, which is, to me, is on one hand is really cool, and on the other hand, it's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
Uh, so no. To get back to the original question, no, it's not spoilery. There's this substance on the planet Arrakis. I mentioned it earlier, the spice
Spice.
called
Yes.
melange, and it is instrumental in for space travel, and also for many of the Bene Gesserit, female religious order, if you will. They use it in many respects as well. But what it does is it enables the space navigators to fold space, for example, so enabling space travel.
Yeah.
And it is basically one of the most precious, or it's the most precious substance in the universe, because it enables everything that is going on. And one of the byproducts of, or one of the side effects of having a diet with some of this spice in there is your eyes begin to turn, the whites of your eyes begin to turn blue. So it's just one of the so all of the native people on the Fremen on Arrakis, they all have the blue within blue eyes, and eventually even off-worlders will get it. That same hint. Although you don't see it much with Paul in this, I imagine it will probably manifest more in the second act.
Is it kind of a nod to the concept of going native, or is it just? I mean, it is really a cool visual idea, but the idea that the indigenous people have it because obviously spice is plentiful on their planet, but as the other people experience it, or no?
I don't necessarily, I don't think of it that way.
Okay.
Some people might be able to interpret that, but it'll be interesting to see if somehow that gets played up. But in the novel, there are a few references to it, because the spice is in everything that gets cooked. I mean, it's all the time. So I think that a lot of the non-natives who are there on the planet do take pride in not having the blue within blue eyes. So, but it isn't prominent. I mean, it's not discussed at length, but there is a tone of that, of elitism, if you will, for having white eyes, among the elites of Arrakis.
Interesting. All right, well, let's wrap this up.
Sure.
My Lord Duke.
Where the fear is gone, only I will remain.
And this part gave me chills.
I imagine. All right, that's a good place to stop. These are the sandworms, am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. The makers, as they call them.
Okay. Did this fit kind of what you envisioned when you read the book?
My vision of them from the book was a little more in line with what they looked like in the David Lynch adaptation. They weren't exactly alike, but I kind of pictured them. I pictured them having more of a tapered, front end, if you will.
Yeah.
And as opposed to the way that this is portrayed with the rows of teeth, I like this from a biology perspective, though, because it has a feel that it makes me think of the whales that have the filter basically in their mouth, and that's what this makes me think of as these creatures move through the sand or whatever. I can't help but think that they are filtering nutrients out somehow or another. So I'll be interested to see how they address this. But this, I like this because it also, I mean, it's weird, but it makes me think of an eye. And,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of religious significance to the makers among the native Fremen, and so I feel like that is a good look. I like this look better than what I envisioned early on from for myself.
Let me ask this: are the worms big enough? Is this about the right size?
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm confident that there will be bigger worms than even that one.
Interesting. And yeah, it's one of those things like once again, if you were to ask me about Dune, someone who has not read the book but is going to, um, you know, the things that I know about just from knowing about Dune is pain box,
Hmm.
sandworms, and I know a little bit about the sort of I guess the Star Wars parallels that there's sort of this it's sort of the Godfather that inspired Star Wars. So I think those are probably the big
Right.
three. I'm trying to think other things that have probably piped up. I've heard about spice before,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, the worms are definitely a big part of it. Now, out of curiosity, do the worms pose an existential threat to people trying to live here?
Uh, they well, yeah, they are a constant hazard,
Yeah,
but not in the sense that they need to be they simply have to be avoided.
yeah.
They're simply part of the ecology there, and they take there's only so much you can do against them because the situation that in this world that he's created with weaponry is it's there's some uniqueness to it. And so really the only way you can deal with a worm is through the use of atomics, as they call them, basically nuclear weapons. But the use of atomics is extremely, it's frowned upon for lots of reasons so that you can, easily imagine. Uh, but uh, but they have simply learned to not coexist with them, but they've learned how to avoid them. And but they are a constant. They are a threat for those in the desert. They're a threat for harvesting spice, that sort of thing. But they're just simply something that must be avoided rather than dealt with.
Right. And it does make me think like I once had a science teacher that was talking about how many worms actually exist on planet Earth. And I think
Right.
what he said was if you were to remove everything on Earth except for the worms, you would still see a perfect sphere out in outer space. Like you would see the worms. Like there's just that
Wow.
many like aliens would come to our planet and think that it's their planet. It belongs to the
You know, I
worms.
I think I remember hearing something like that. That if you removed like everything except for the worms, that the living organism population percentage wise would drop less than like 0.1% or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible with these. I mean, obviously being larger, they are certainly not as they're certainly not as numerous.
Yeah.
But that said, they are ever present in the open desert, and there is plenty of open desert on Arrakis.
Nice. All right, well, let's wrap up. Oh, did it stop? All right, let's
I
talk
love
about
that logo.
that logo looks so good. It's one of
Yeah,
those logos that when you see it, you're like, oh, duh, why hasn't the logo always been that way?
I know.
Because
That is a good way to put it.
the four letters, you're just like, oh yeah, it's what would you say? It's like left, up, down, right. Like you're like, okay, yeah, it's
Yeah.
the and yeah, it looks that logo looks really good. And I've seen like some people that have played with sort of the rounding out of that, but I think the movie really hits on that. And I will say that the word Dune itself, Like there's something about it. Maybe I'm thinking of like, gosh, oh, the guy who wrote Tarzan, who also wrote John Carter of Mars. I think like
Oh, okay.
Barsoom, like the Dune. It like there's something that feels very uh, alien about it. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, it it really is. I mean, it's such an unusual title, and I still have the book that I bought back in eighth grade or back in the early '80s, and I was so serious about undertaking this the right way that I bought a hardbound version of it.
Ooh, well
You know,
done.
that I w- right. I mean, I was committed to this thing, and the logo, the cover is so simple. It just shows sand dunes and then the word Dune up top,
Yeah,
and that's it. But there is. I mean, that always struck me because there was so little to it as far as the title goes. It's just very simple. Uh, but uh, but now, I mean, it carries a tremendous amount of weight. That word has so much more power now than it ever would have. Uh, you know, you you just say Dune, and it evokes so much uh, now. And I think it's interesting that he gravitated towards that, in when he was writing it, uh, and sensing that kind of harumph to that word,
yeah.
the potential that it had like that.
Well, and there's something about like when your story can have one syllable, like
Yeah,
Dune, like that is a strong move right there. Because even Fellowship of the Ring, like it's a little bit of a mouthful. Um, Star
right,
Wars,
right,
you get two syllables, so you're honing in a little bit more. But when you can be a one
yeah,
syllable, just Dune, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, there's something about it that yeah, it does have kind of a
yeah.
presence.
Definitely. Although there's something to be said about, the depending on what you're writing, there's something to be said about slightly longer titles.
Yeah,
But when something as epic as that, I mean, it really does. I mean, it just, I mean, it's just so simple. But yeah, I am really. I tell you what, I am just so excited about this. Although given the current state of things, I have no idea how I will see it, when it eventually is released. So, fingers crossed uh, on how that will play out.
yeah, that's the thing that I was kind of wondering about because it feels like a movie that you would just have to see in theaters.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
know that a lot of people, trying to bring up the chat real quick. I know a lot of people are, yeah, kind of trying to figure out how to do all that. I know that they have like smaller capacity movie theaters and you can rent out movie theaters. I know that that's
Right.
been, so maybe we're gonna have to like get our friends together and figure out how much it would cost for us just to get the movie theater to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I know what you mean. Of course, I'm about to make a move, and
Yeah.
the town that I'm moving to, it does have a movie theater. Uh, it two screens, in fact.
Ooh.
So I mean, it's not just one screen, but two screens. So they do get new releases though. But I don't know how things, obviously things aren't going well right now.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe this will be one. It's a smaller theater, would probably be much more cost effective for me to rent this one out for a few people.
There you go.
But who knows? Maybe this will maybe we will have some progress by the time this movie is actually released.
Yeah, I would hope so. Well, and yeah, I remember I used to live in Commerce, Texas. Went to A&M Commerce there, and we had a two-screen movie theater. And I tell you, I've been to people's houses where the screen was larger than what we had at that. But there was something about that movie theater that just, I don't know, it just, I have warm memories of that tiny little theater. Uh, you know, and you and I are
No.
both of an age where we can remember movie theaters that were the two screen theater, and it wasn't
Oh yeah.
uncommon. You had the right side movie theater and you had the left side movie theater, and those were your choices,
Yep.
and the lobby was in the middle.
Yeah, and for us, our lobby was out front, and there were a set of doors on the right and a set of doors on the left, and the doors on the left were always R, or well, occasionally they would have a non-R movie, but if it was an R-rated movie, it would always be the smaller screen on the left.
Yeah.
Uh, but I actually worked at a movie theater for a number of years in Oklahoma. It was the largest remaining single screen movie theater. It was the biggest screen in the state because this was pre-IMAX.
Hmm.
And it was absolutely massive. And that's when I really began to fall in love with seeing movies on the big screen, because it was huge. And this, I was in college at the time, so we would do midnight movies.
Yeah.
So, we're watching, we're getting different movies every weekend, like Pink Floyd, The Wall, Aliens, it's the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And, and you really gain an appreciation for the massive screen in that format. But I also got a little spoiled too, because I was able to see so many movies with so much room and very few people in there. And I kind of like to replicate the same thing when I go to a movie now and it's completely full. I'm like, oh man, who are all these people? I want to watch this by myself in peace.
Yeah. Well, and coming back to talking about Dune itself, I was
Oh
going to
yeah.
say that I was going to share with you my theory on the sort of colonial Dune, Dances with Wolves, and
Right. Yeah.
Avatar. And we probably need like a sociologist or some sort of professor on to talk about it a little bit more, because obviously I've got my own white male privilege that I bring to it. But I do feel
Ditto.
like with a lot of these stories, yes, there are some problematic elements to it. The white savior aspect of it is problematic. Um, that the colonial message is problematic. But I do think that there's also embedded in a lot of that a anti-colonialism where someone comes out of this world and they reject it and they understand that the way they've been living is kind of fucked up, and so
Yeah.
you're watching it also going, oh, this person's going to see that the world is a lot larger than the world that they previously knew.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I get a little bit of that from the trailer. Like, here's this aristocrat who's now coming to this new world, and maybe there's a little bit of coming of age aspect to it.
Definitely. I
Okay.
mean, there is that in the book, especially.
Yeah.
So it's Paul is 15 in the book when it begins, and so you've got to find for the movie you've got to find that happy medium. But yeah, because of that, you do get to get that message across, and you are right in the sense that what he is able to to take from it. He is not a white warrior using his white privilege to save the native race. He's instead learning that that the world is not what he has been raised to, or is not simply limited to what he has experienced.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not to say that there aren't probably problematic elements in a lot of the older science fiction that we read, and I'm sure Frank Herbert is not immune to those criticisms. But
All
at
right.
the same time, we're all learning, we're all evolving, and I think that there's something to be said for that. So I'm interested to see how Dune kind of approaches those things, because particularly when you've got old science fiction, we now think of them as tropes, but back
Mm-hmm.
then they were inventing them. Like we call them
Right.
tropes now, but for them it was a brand new thing, you know.
Yeah. 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 Eventually, it starts somewhere before it's a trope.
Yeah.
uh, and that is true. They've obviously done some things to to try and change that. There's a character in the movie who is a woman, but in the novel is actually a man.
Mhm.
Well, their gender is absolutely irrelevant to the story.
Yeah.
And but by making a few changes like that, I think like we were talking about earlier, you help uh, you help expand the diversity of it a bit, especially in ways that are that have little impact on the on the story itself, but instead you see the character portrayed in a way by somebody else that uh, it it does in a way. Um, I wouldn't say takes away from the colonialism, but I think it was probably a conscious effort on their part to try and make things a little bit more diverse, much like they did in Star Wars: Empire Strikes Back by bringing on Billy D. Williams to play the part of Lando Calrissian.
Yeah.
It's purposeful, uh, and I think I think it'll work just fine.
Yeah, it is interesting when we look at these older works and kind of how they find new life and how it's done. One thing that I'm interested in, and I'm excited to read the book and to watch the movie, is I think we've fallen into a trap with a lot of our science fiction and fantasy where it comes down to the warrior who just has to kill the one bad guy in order for everything to be fixed. It's the here's the dude, and if we kill him, the problem's solved. And it's really sort of this violence-based solution problem. And it seems to me, I could be wrong here, it seems to me that Dune is not a all we have to do is kill the big bad and everything will be okay.
That you are correct. There's a lot of politics going on in the novel. I kind of think that's one reason why I love politics now in real life is because of the politics that are on display in this book. Plans within plans within plans, and as a result, uh, resolution is not simple like we've got to kill Thanos.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And happy endings are have to be more nuanced. I'll be interested in seeing how they finish this up as compared to the previous Dune, which they really said, okay, this is how it ends, and they gave it a really like swelling happy ending, if you will,
Yeah.
and that was completely inaccurate. Uh, but um, uh, but yeah, I mean, this seeing the trailer, I mean, I'm so excited about it. It's gonna be good. I think
Well,
it's in
let
good
me
hands. We know that.
that is true. Now, to kind of wrap up this discussion, um, I want to get your final thoughts, and I kind of got them a little bit there, but best case scenario for this movie, worst case scenario for this movie. Let's look at, like, what do you think would be a best possible situation for the movie? Like, what would be the thing that you're like, okay, now I know that it really is doing justice to the source material?
Wow. Well, I got to say that's a tough one. Um, it's
And I guess I'm thinking, like, if it does this, then I know that yeah, it made up for previous missteps.
you know based on what I'm seeing, I'm already thinking that they have, made up on the previous missteps. They have a powerhouse, what I consider to be a powerhouse cast.
Yeah.
Nobody who is too overwhelming or anything like that. And it's not built around a particular person or actor or so. It's I wish I had an answer for that question because that's a tough one. It's I, I think what when I'm going to be going in, I'm always going to be carrying preconceived notions, but but I really do feel like that when I sit down and watch adaptations of novels I've read, I go in with a really really open mind, and if something is missing, I wait until I have seen it. I've seen some of it. So it's um, you know, I think if the one thing that we haven't seen in the trailer yet is the Emperor. And so I think rather than saying best, I would pivot to a worst case scenario if if the politics involving the emperor, et cetera, are not featured, or not put in place strongly, then I would have a really big problem with that. I would think that they didn't capture it the right way. But if they do, if they also if they get the Bene Gesserit, if they get the Bene Gesserit right, and if they get the overall, and this won't make sense to you, but anyone watching this will know who's a fan. If they get the Kwisatz Haderach correct, if they do that, if they feature that the right way, then and the role with the Bene Gesserit, then I think that's what will be a high mark for me.
Yeah, well, and I think, having not read the book, but the thing I would worry about is if the movie feels too much like a Marvel movie. And I love Marvel movies, don't get me wrong, but if they like spend the last hour just in these sort of epic fight scenes with stylized, fight, and they just want to blow out the action. Honestly, if I want action, I just pop in Mad Max. Like
Yeah,
Fury Road gives me everything I want, and I feel like just tell a good story. I don't need the third act to just be this overblown, you know. And it worked in things
right.
like I would actually say Game of Thrones. I know people complain about the last season of Game of Thrones, but I really liked that long night
Hmm.
battle that was just beginning to end and it did not relent and it was just like I felt like that was probably the highlight of the season for me.
I
But
agree. That for me,
I don't need that in all of my stuff. I don't
right.
need that too much. So that's the only thing I would worry about is if they get a little too and I guess that's the way I'd say it. If it feels like a
I
Marvel movie.
Yeah, and to that, I would say that if I don't think that that's likely based upon the source material.
Yeah.
The some of the I think there will be plenty of action, but I really think that some of the more action-oriented stuff will be the more intimate battles that are actually being fought,
Mhm.
as opposed to mass battles.
Yeah.
There's in the book there's a lot of one-on-one combat, and if they sacrifice that in the name of having some sort of bigger, grander, Marvel type battle, then that will definitely be a problem. I don't think that will happen though, based upon the way the story is written. Uh, of course, in the book, like most, of course, the big battle at the
Yeah.
end, but that's not the really important one. So almost like not unlike the sense of the Scouring of the Shire
Yeah.
is such an important finale to, or final piece in Lord of the Rings. It's not the main battle.
Yeah.
It's not the big battle, but it's very, very important. And so something kind of similar, is going on with this story as well, that lends itself to not being a good format for a big, Marvel action blow up type of thing. So I'm confident that they won't make that mistake, because I sure hope they don't.
I just put a fear in you because yeah, I do see a lot of movies and TV shows now that they really get into the spectacle of what they're trying to do. And let's be honest, I mean, Game of Thrones, because I feel like that's a great example to come back. Game of Thrones was at its best when it was a character study. When
Hmm.
we begin to see Robert Baratheon as this tragic Shakespearean character, like those are some of the best moments,
Yeah,
not the spectacle of the CGI dragons, even though, they're
right.
fine too.
Right, right. Yeah, that's why I have a lot of faith in the director,
Yeah.
and that's why I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so enthused, that we're not I think we're in for a treat. I don't think I am not too worried. But I'll be nervous about it. I want it to do well because I want people to see it, and even if they don't read the book, I want them to experience the story and get the same sense of wonder and awe that I get from reading the book.
Yeah, now the challenge for me is the movie's coming out in December, right? Is it December or late November?
I don't know that
I mean,
they've even set a date.
oh, they had to
Uh,
have because they set those like 3 years in advance or whatever.
well, they do, but everything is so
Well, that's true. Up in the air.
right. Everything keeps getting pushed back, and it's okay. It's saying December 18th. Yes.
Okay, so that's close to Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's way
Well,
sooner than I thought.
and that's one of those things where, yeah, like I'm now trying to figure out because I've got my to read pile. I feel like I should probably be starting Dune like yesterday if I want to
Uh,
have read it before we actually get to the movie.
yeah, it probably would be advisable to go ahead and get on that.
I mean, I've got it. I
Uh,
already have it on my Kindle. It's ready. It's
oh,
locked and
perfect.
loaded. But right now I'm
Excellent.
reading the novella "Story of Your Life," which was the basis for the movie. Oh gosh, what was that recent? Uh, s- is it Ascension? Space, the alien movie with the linguist. Um, did really well in
Oh,
theaters. Like, it literally is
now
drawing a
I can't even remember. Yeah,
it's
I'm drawing
yeah,
a blank.
it complete. I could look it up, but I won't. Anyway, I'm reading that right now, and then there's a book called Ring Shout, which is by one of my favorite authors, a guy named P. Jelly Clark. It's a
Hmm.
sort of fantasy horror. I don't know, but basically, it's the Ku Klux Klan are like this demonic cult that are like these demons that have to be killed. And
Okay.
I'm not doing the premise justice, but it's coming out in October, and that's like I have to read it the moment it comes out.
I need you to send me the link on that. That sounds
I'll
interesting.
I'll send you the link because Ring Shout has been getting great reviews. I love the author. The author does a sort of steampunk and Cairo type series that is really fun.
Interesting.
And he's got a full novel of that coming out, and then Ring Shout just looks great. So I think maybe after I finish Ring Shout, I'm going to jump on Dune, and maybe even if I don't finish it, maybe I can at least be well enough in that it will that I
Yeah,
can.
yeah. Well, fortunately, the movie is in two acts.
So
So
there, I'm done. I just need to read half of it.
right, exactly. Yep.
Unless I find out that like the first movie only covers like 4/5 of it, and then the last movie is like the
Yeah.
whole.
Well, fortunately, it isn't like that. That where or I can't imagine that it will be like that because there isn't. It's pretty evenly paced, and I have an idea as to where they probably will put the break in.
I'm sure if I do a little bit of online research, I could probably figure that one out. Like, because they've probably already discussed it somewhere, like where the break's going to be in this one. So
Right, right. And the book does actually have a break like that.
cool.
Section one, section two, or whatever they call it. So they may even go so far as to call it book one or book two, the same way that Fellowship of the Ring is actually in
Hmm.
two parts, even though it's one volume.
Yeah,
So I always thought that was so weird. 6 books in 3 volumes. Uh,
but it's one
and
book.
but it's one book.
Yeah, no, and that's always the fun thing is when you're telling a series, like how does it break down? What's considered the canon? And because I know that Dune goes well beyond the first book,
Yeah,
but
yeah, there are actually 6 or 7. I haven't read the full series.
yeah,
I read the first 3, but after that they jump way ahead in the future.
yeah.
Like 1,000 years or something like that. Yeah, the first 3 were enough for me, and then I just keep rereading the first one because it's the one that started it all.
Yeah, very nice. Well, Michael, thank you so much for jumping on Twitch with me. I think we got a little bit of
Yeah.
drag on the video, but the audio should be fine. So if people just simply listen to the sounds of our voices, it'll be the podcast we've been talking about. So now, are you
Yeah,
good with
absolutely.
hopping on periodically? Like we can keep doing
Yes,
this?
please. Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
putting
Yeah,
you on
let's
the
do
spot
this.
here because
No, 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 not at all.
I don't know.
I would,
Oh, sorry.
I would love to. So yeah, I mean, let me know.
Yeah, because I know that like I can bring on like if I can invite authors and artists and other people and I can have like conversations with them, but I also just need someone that like we can talk for an hour and a half about Tolkien or about new D&D stuff and uh
Hmm.
and and so I know that you and I we have no problem filling up an hour.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, you let me know because I definitely, I look forward to the next time already.
Yeah, because as I said, I need to bring on like I'm gonna watch sometime this weekend. I'm gonna watch Enola Holmes, so maybe that'll be the next thing.
Yeah, we're going to watch it sometime this week as well. My wife, in fact, we may end up watching it tonight. We're about to finish Fright Night,
Uh,
the original, and we watched about an hour of it last night, and we're going to finish it up tonight. And but I think Enola Holmes is the next movie on our list.
it's funny. Right now we're watching Forever, which was a series on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
And the funny thing about it was, my wife is not a huge speculative fiction fan. She watched Game of Thrones, but everyone watched Game of Thrones. But
Right.
but she's not like, oh heck yeah, I've got to read the new Brandon Sanderson novels or Patrick Rothfuss or yeah, I mean she's not into that stuff. And I was talking to her, I was like, sweetie, I was like, speculative fiction is everywhere. Literally, these authors are writing the things that are going to be the favorite series like 2 years from now on HBO.
Hmm.
I like you just can't avoid it. Speculative fiction is everywhere. And so we're watching Forever, which is one that she thought she was like, okay, this one looks good. Third episode in, it turns out that it is speculative fiction. Like it started off normal.
Right.
And then by the third
Yeah.
episode, we're like, spoiler, we're in the afterlife. And so I look
Uh
over at my wife and I'm like, you can't avoid us. We're everywhere. like
huh.
it's just I'm sorry you were she was born during a period in our culture where it seems like most entertainment is geared towards me. Like
Well, that,
Marvel, Dune, Star Wars, Star Trek, like I'm like everything, right? The entire entertainment industry is built towards nerds.
right. Yep.
I'm so
And
sorry.
yeah, yeah, and now those nerds have grown up and are writing
Yeah.
based upon what they were entertained by. And hey, I have no problem with that.
I know, but I feel bad because I think my wife's just like, just give me a romantic comedy. Just give me something that does not involve me having to learn the culture and religion and politics of another alien planet. So so it goes. Well, anyway, Michael, I'm going to let you go, and
Okay.
we will talk again soon. I'll send you a link for Ring Shout because yeah, I
Yeah,
need some
please
other
do.
people to read it because it looks great.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. All
All
right.
right,
Well, cool. Yeah, send me that. It can be a future discussion, and
there
maybe
we
we
go.
can chat about Enola Holmes.
Sounds good. Talk to you later, man.
All right. Bye.
Bye. All right. Let's see the video coming on. I've got a still image here. Let's see. Coming on. Okay, well, that is all that we have. I'm sure there's been some technical difficulties, but every time I'm getting a little bit better at this. So, um, yes, I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. Michael is a dear, dear friend of mine, and I would happily talk to him for a few more hours. And you guys can watch or not. We're just happy to talk about speculative fiction and the stuff that we get excited about. So anyways, that is all. You guys have a great rest of your weekend.